How many times was I told, you're not a man? Well, obviously, I'm not a man, but I can do this job. I can carry 5 cameras on my back, and I can get the story, and it will be done well, and I will work harder than you can ever imagine, and my standards for how things will be delivered is high. I mean, I'm a beast on my own back.
Welcome to the National Wildlife Federation Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Drew Youngdyke. I'm recording this here at the Outdoor Writers Association of America Conference in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I have with me actually somebody that I wanted to get to record this podcast last year. And we finally sat down. This is Kris Millgate, author and outdoor writer and video producer and producer of a whole lot of other outdoor media content, who I'm very excited to see is wearing an Artemis Sportswoman t-shirt right now. That's actually part of the collaboration with Hunt to Eat, who you heard about with Nicole Quality area a few episodes ago. Kris Millgate has been a longtime member of the Outdoor Writers Association of America. I met her last year. She's also an avid runner, which I appreciate. And before I prattle on any longer, I'm just going to let Kris tell you about herself. Kris, thanks for joining the podcast. What do you do in outdoor media right now?
Thank you for having me. What do I do in outdoor media? Pretty much anything that happens outside, where there isn't a referee involved, right? You know, I think that a lot of times people think about the outdoors and they try to stick everybody in a category, and you have your hook and bullet, and then you have your hike and bike, and one's on this side of the trail, the other one's on this side of the trail, and really they come together. So what I do is I work in both worlds, and I need to understand hook and bullet, and I need to understand hike and bike. But the thing that they both have in common, even if they don't think they do, is they all use that same natural resource. And conserving that natural landscape for hook and bullet and hike and bike is critically important. So I kind of see it as my job is making sure that everyone that plays on the resource, no matter how they play, they all need the same thing, and they got to kind of come together. And when you do a story, you can always bring them together by talking about, this is where we all play, this is the place we all need to protect.
And your writing really reflects that. How do you draw upon your personal experiences to inform your writing? And for folks that haven't read you yet, what are some of the places where your writing has appeared that they can check that out?
Ooh, that was like 50 questions at once. So my native medium is video. That means I'm a TV reporter. And for a decade, I worked for every network in the country but CBS. That's just how things shook out on my contracts. And I was a general assignment reporter, so I covered everything. But at the same time, I always kept boots in my car. So I could go from court to crops. And I could cover stuff, and I didn't mind getting dirty, and I knew that I could go out and cover a range of issues. And then I would also stick in the outdoor story. There was no official outdoor beat, but I covered those because those issues mattered. And I wanted people to know about outdoor issues. And then after a decade of moving around the country for TV contracts, I could kind of see that the media world was about to shift. I mean, the internet was out. I mean, everything was going to mesh. So I went freelance. And when I went freelance, it opened up more than TV. So I could do newspapers, magazines. I owned my content. I could put it on TV. I could put it anywhere. But then I niched down at the same time, which means 95% of what I cover has to do with the outdoors.
Okay. And
our natural resources. So I can cover a story for a newspaper, a magazine, or a TV, or a radio, or web. And I can do it in all those different formats with photo and video. But it's all related to the outdoors. No more crops and crime. I don't have to cover that stuff anymore. And then I could build my audience that way. And then I'm based in Idaho. So that's my base camp. And that's where I can cover things like trapping grizzly bears and spawning cutthroat trout, or banding bald eagles. There's some significant things happening where I live, so I'm there for a reason. But I can hop on a plane and work anywhere. I can work on the Mississippi River. I can work in New Mexico. And that's kind of where I find that even though I'm niched down to outdoors versus covering everything that needs to happen from the news desk at a TV station, there's so much going on in the outdoor world now that the potential for story content is pretty endless. And it's something that appeals to people too. I mean, court's boring. sometimes outdoor issues go to court, but sitting in court is not the kind of news that people really want to pay attention to.
And through all that outdoor content, you seem to keep returning to conservation issues again and again. I feel like that's where I tend to find most of your stories. What are the biggest conservation issues that you see that you've been covering lately that impact our ability to be outdoors no matter how we're pursuing it?
Well, there's the ones that everybody's beating like a dead horse right now. Public lands, access to those public lands, clean water, clean air. Those kind of seem to be the one that everyone's keen in on. The thing that no one's really keen in on yet, that I am, is it comes down to scientists. Scientists do amazing work. They just don't know how to tell that story. I'm the translator. I need to understand what they're doing, translate it in a way that appeals to the general population, so they go, wow, this is pretty cool. It can be anything from cleaning up a river to sticking a band on a teeny tiny hummingbird leg. But that works cool if you know how to translate what's going on. So inside those stories, in the last year, the conversation has changed. When I ask a scientist a question about anything, and call it climate change, call it what you want, the environment's shifting. And when I ask scientists about that, the way they answer those questions has changed. So they answer in present tense instead of future. So instead of saying the water level on the coast is going to rise, it's the water levels on the coast are up. So instead of saying climate change is coming or environmental shifts are coming, it's more that the climate change or environmental shift is here. So we're in it. It's not about how we're going to prevent it down the road. It's we're in it, and how are we going to live in it? So it's here. And that shift in the way people answer questions about the changes on our globe has turned into a present tense usage in just the last year.
Wow. Are you seeing that out where you recreate, where you do outdoor adventures? How are you seeing that play out through your experiences?
Well, I work with, you asked me about my outlets earlier. So USA Today, I have stories in there right now, but one of the other ones I've worked with the whole time I've been freelance is a PBS affiliate. So I make shows for public TV. And when I started working with public TV, we would have the summer season to shoot our show. And this was going to be mostly what we're shooting in Idaho, but this rule kind of applies to the whole West. We would start shooting, if we didn't want snow in the shots, we could start in April or May, and we could work through October. Now, if we need to shoot an outdoor show that looks like summer with no snow, we have from April till the end of June. And do you know why? Because wildfire season starts.
Okay.
All of a sudden, we've lost half of our shooting season because unless the story is about wildfire, our sky is not clear enough to shoot scenic landscape shots without them being full of fire and smoke. And if your story isn't about fire and smoke, it's really distracting to look at that in a story about river restoration, for example.
You know, and folks that listen to this know that I'm based in Michigan. So, you know, we have a little wildfire once in a while, but for folks from other parts of the country, from the east, what is the normal fire season cycle out west? So what would we normally expect to see before climate change versus what we're seeing now?
Well, I think the challenge you have there is twofold. No one really has a good handle on what normal is anymore because we didn't get a handle on it before the changes started.
Okay.
And because we, especially in the West, we come from 100 years of fire suppression. And I remember when my story coverage changed from putting everything out to, you know what, we might let this burn. I remember the year that the way I covered wildfire changed. And they said in this interview, we're going to let this one burn. And that never happened before. So because we have this century of suppressing the fire, we have larger, hotter fires, longer burning season, because at the same time that we're trying to figure out what's going to happen because we didn't let things burn for 100 years, we also have it being hotter and drier. And so there's that climate element is pushing in on the man-made element of
more fuel,
not letting fuel burn for 100 years. So the new normal is really kind of unpredictable.
Because
when
we
it comes to
didn't
fire.
really know what the old normal was.
Right, and I like to say
Yep.
it like this. Everyone thinks we have 4 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Winter, spring, summer, fall. Well, in the West, we now have 5. Winter, spring, summer, fire, fall. Did I get that right? Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Fire is our 5th season.
And you got to realize in Michigan, you just have like winter and then like almost spring and then winter again and then fall, spring and then mud and then another usually round of winter and like 2 weeks of summer, 1 week of fall, and then it's winter again. So, I mean,
yeah,
we have like 8 seasons in Michigan, but like half of those are just different versions of winter. So.
Well, we have a new season. It's our 5th season, and it's fire season.
Yep.
And it's interesting I'm based in the West. I understand the West. It's where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
But when I work with an editor back east, and she says, I'm going to dump your story because I hear that there's a lot of wildfires out there, so people aren't going to travel out there. That story's not going to work. And I say, there's 4 million people visiting Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Everything's on fire. Everybody's still coming out here to visit. Yeah, our air's kind of like an ashtray. There's nothing you can do about it. But even when fires are vast, you're not shutting down everything because of it. You're just trying to learn to live with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're pitching editors across the country, whether it's the East or the shows that you're producing. The places that you go, though, aren't like going around to the local neighborhood park all the time. You're actually going out in the backcountry. You're going onto our public lands. Just around the conference here, I've been carrying a backpack with a laptop and a podcast mic and a camera, and I feel like I'm doing Train to Hunt again. So when you're doing video shoots, because I see you're a trail runner, you're doing lots of this stuff. How many cameras are you taking? Like, what kind of video equipment do you have to bring with you into those places to be able to tell those stories?
I am a trail runner, as are you, and that's how we met, and
Yep.
I love that idea. I run trails so that I can stay in shape to do my job. I mean, that I would be mortified if I couldn't get to a story because I was not healthy enough to get there. That's vital. I'm out of my story right away if I can't even get there. And to get there, sometimes I have to raft to get in. Sometimes I have to fly in very small planes to get in. Or I haven't had to bike into a mountain bike. I haven't had to bike into a story in a while, but I have done that.
Okay.
Oh no, a couple weeks ago I had 3 cameras on my back on a mountain bike. What am I saying? I have to row to get in, and I have to do a lot of hiking, and it can be several miles. And I always think about all the gear I carry, and way back in the day before I was pro in college, they carried a lot more gear than I do. But now I carry, the difference from freelance when I started 13 years ago to now is when I started I carried 1 camera. Now I carry 5 and a tripod. And my tripod is actually heavier than my cameras today, but it's vital. I'm small. Mm-hmm. My body frame is small. I'm kind of wiry, and you're going to be breathing hard when you're hiking anyway. So if I think I'm going to be able to shoot something steady without a tripod, I'm crazy. I'm breathing, my blood's pumping, we're all human. Even if we're holding still, we're not holding that still. So tripod's heavy, but I still carry it. And then I have my video camera, which is my main camera, and it's the biggest and the heaviest. I carry a photo still camera, which has video mode, but I don't use it.
Okay.
I use my video camera for video. I kind of think of it as, my still camera has a video setting. Yeah, well, my microwave has a clock, but I didn't buy it for the clock. So I have my video camera, my still camera. I'm a certified drone pilot. I can go in the air. I want that angle, and passing that pilot's test isn't easy, but I want that angle. I have underwater camera, and that is also, I use that point of view. I can put it on your body. I can put it on your bike. And then the 5th camera on every shoot is my phone. And that's a social media use. I won't really ever use the shots on my phone in a big magazine layout. Mm-hmm. I mean, I bet you could get away with the resolution, but I don't do it. I have my camera for that. And then I use that, though, so when I'm on the trail with the Wildlife Federation, Idaho Wildlife Federation is doing trail work for a show I'm working on. Mm-hmm. I'm shooting with all my cameras for that segment inside the TV show, but it takes me 2 seconds to take out my phone and take a picture of them learning how to build water bars on a trail to keep the water running off. And I can post that day and talk about what I'm working on.
How much work do you do with the Idaho Wildlife Federation? That's interesting, because I knew that you've worked with our with the Artemis program.
Yes.
The T-shirt that you're wearing right now. And then actually one of our first, I think it was maybe our third podcast, I interviewed Brian Brooks with the Idaho Wildlife Federation, and they've been doing a lot of work lately, especially on salmon, the dwindling salmon numbers, the impact of the dams, as well as on landlocked public land. What kind of work are you profiling for them?
So I've covered the salmon for more than a decade, and public land issues since long before the standoff at Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. And I worked with the National Wildlife Federation first in the way that, so I do all these stories for news, and I own Tightline Media, and under that there's this umbrella where there's news and there's production. Under news, I'm working for a news outlet and I'm turning a story for them. Under production, I can be contracted to produce a film, and I've done that for National Wildlife Federation. And the most recent one would be Your Land, and that's about public land across the country.
Yep.
While shooting that, I met Brian from the Idaho Wildlife Federation, and we used the chapters from the different states inside this film that was about the Federation as a whole. And then when I started working on the Trailblazers show, I really wanted to make sure that we included people that hunt and fish, because you know what they are? They're hikers before they get in there to hunt and fish, or while they're hunting and fishing. I hike a lot of miles in my waders. And so I didn't want just hikers. That matters, yes, but so does everybody else that's on the trail. And I called the Wildlife Federation. I said, Brian, are you going to do any trail work this summer? Well, you know what? Pretty much every organization, regardless of what their user is doing trail work, because the federal government doesn't have the budget to maintain trails anymore. So what I'm seeing in Idaho is the issues that the Idaho Wildlife Federation is focusing on. While I've covered them for a decade, I did not know the Idaho Wildlife Federation until the last 2 years through an introduction from the National Wildlife Federation. And I commend them for what they're doing, because they finally have a presence in Idaho, and I think it's important to have that presence. We're in the hot zone for public lands, for salmon. I mean, we're trying to save these spawning grounds for a fish that's going through 800 miles of stuff that happens before they even get to our border. And I like that they're taking the initiative to act. They're kind of at the forefront of what's going on. And I like that. You know, when the governor of Idaho announces National Public Lands Day, look at the picture I shot that day. The head of the Idaho Wildlife Federation is right over his shoulder holding up a sign. That's significant.
How important is it to these conservation battles, fights, and issues that we're all engaged in? How important is the type of storytelling that you do to achieving those types of victories like Public Lands Day in Idaho? How do you see that role of telling the story fitting into the work of conservation that's been going on?
I see it in a couple of different ways. The first way would be state. Well, the first way would be people. But when I look at like state, Idaho's kind of a black hole. I mean, its natural resources are vast, more than 60% public land. We have a lot going on in Idaho, but it's not on most people's radar. And so when something significant like our governor comes out and declares Public Lands Day, that puts Idaho on the national radar for a very important issue. So that's kind of a good focus point. Look what Idaho's trying to do that nobody pays attention to. The other part of it is people. Anytime I want to tell a story, it has to be told through people, because I want the audience, other people, to be able to connect with it. If I can't make them care about the issue, they're not going to pay attention to the issue. How do they care about the issue? It's not from a bureaucrat. It's from another person that's just like them, that hunts and fishes and hikes and bikes.
You say another person just like them, and I think one of the things that we've been hearing about here at the Outdoor Writers Association Conference of America conference is the importance of telling the stories through people that the intended audience can relate to. For much of your career, you have been the only woman out in the woods telling the story. And how important is it then that you can tell that story? Because you usually tell the story about somebody else. How important, though, is it for you to tell your own story so that others can relate to you and follow you out there?
Yeah, I like that you recognize that. So I went to school to become a broadcast journalist. I always knew what I was going to do. I was going to tell you a story, and I actually grew up painfully shy. So to look you in the eye and sit here like we are now, not happening. You have a beard. I was terrified of beards when I was little. So this, between us, with you looking me in the eye and having a beard, no way, I'd run and hide. And so, but down in that shy little girl that was afraid of beards, I knew I was going to be a storyteller, and I knew that some of the best stories were outdoor natural resource stories, and I wanted to figure out how to make people care about those, so that they want to protect those things. They have to know about them to care about them, and if they care about them, they take care of them. Well, in School for News, you're taught that news stories are not about you. And when you make it about you, you're causing a distraction. So a lot of times people think that reporters, especially when they're doing a live shot, it's vanity. You know, their hair's perfect, their makeup's perfect, their shirt's straight, everything's in order. And while it is, it's not really about vanity, it's about the fact that you're reducing the distraction. So I want you to pay attention to what I have to tell you, but it isn't about me. When I'm on an assignment for a news outlet, it's about what everybody else thinks. It's not about what I think. I want to deliver you the information, and then you make up your mind. So when I write those stories and those scripts, there's no I in that story. It's not about me, that I don't exist inside a news story. I'm just the messenger. But what happens is over the years, people start saying, what's it like to be the only woman in the woods? And frankly, sometimes I am. There are more women in the outdoors, and I'm so excited to see the movement toward that. But there's a lot of times that I feel really alone because I am the only woman on the crew. And I'm in the woods for multiple days at a time with beards that I used to be afraid of. And then they start saying, well, I'm in Idaho. I live in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. We have grizzly bears. Well, what's it like to go nose to nose with a grizzly? Well, I'll tell you right now, you will pee your pants. I mean, there's no denying that. And the scientists won't say that, but I'll say that because I'm a real human at that point, and that's a scary moment.
Oh, yeah. You know, a few weeks ago, my buddy and I were fishing up in northern Michigan, and we came around the corner of the trail, and there's just a mama bear over there with a couple cubs up in the tree. And we didn't get too close, but we got close enough that I was like, yeah, we need to get further away. It wasn't pee your pants type of situation.
Well, at least that's all I did.
Yeah,
I mean,
but it was, but even just with a northern Michigan black bear, it was like, yeah, we need to get a little further away.
Yeah. So people really, not everybody can be on the trail, but I want to make them feel like they're on the trail. I want to put them in that moment so it matters to them. And when people start saying, when I would do a public appearance or we'd host a film festival and show my films, they'd say, well, what was it like to stand in the middle of that wildfire? What's it like to, run your fingers across the feathers of a bald eagle? A bald eagle that when I was little, I was told would disappear. They were on the endangered species list since the year I was born, and they were going to disappear because we were putting chemicals out on the crops. But now my kids see bald eagles every day, and it's magnificent to know that we have fixed enough things that bald eagles have recovered. So it's cool to witness that. It's an honor to get to experience all that and then share it with everyone. But when people start asking me, do you really know how to fish? Yes, I do. There's no stunt double. I really do all of this. And I realized that the more people asked what it's like kind of behind the scenes, those kind of became stories that people wanted. That I, in the story that doesn't exist in news, can exist in a book. So then this concept of a book comes out. I really want you to write that story about what it was like when that bear woke up and you peed your pants. I really want to know, what's it like to stand at a standoff on public lands at a national wildlife refuge and listen to men fight over who gets to use the land and how they get to use that. Those kind of issues matter, and all of a sudden they want to know what it feels like as a human versus just a reporter delivering the facts. So that's what goes in the book.
Okay. And let's talk about your book.
Yeah.
That's coming out any day now. I think by the time people listen to this, it should be out August
6th.
August 6th, that's
August
right.
6th.
And what's the title of your book?
My Place Among Men.
And you've been working on this, I think at least since last year I saw, or probably before that. That's when I think I first heard about the project in the works. In addition to telling those stories, what do you want people to get out of the book?
There's multiple goals in there. Inside the book, for My Place Among Men, there's 3 parts. There's part 1, which is hiding, and that's about me growing up as a shy little girl afraid of beards. Part 2 is chasing, and that's my career. And part 3 is finding, and that's actually about motherhood. And so if you drill down on those things, what we have there is doing what it is that you know with absolute certainty you want to do with your life. Not everybody wants to be a reporter. I did. And once you learn that what you want to do with 100% certainty is what you should go after, I want you to go after it. Whether it's a reporter, it's a doctor, it's a librarian, go after it 100%. Even when people say this job is not for you. I mean, how many times was I told, you're not a man? Well, obviously, I'm not a man, but I can do this job. I can carry 5 cameras on my back, and I can get the story, and it will be done well, and I will work harder than you can ever imagine, and my standards for how things will be delivered is high. I mean, I'm a beast on my own back, and I knew that I just want people to know that they can do whatever it is they want to do, regardless of who thinks they cannot do it. The other thing is, when you are the minority outside, what's going on is kind of experienced in a different way. And just because you don't see other people out there that look like you doesn't mean you don't deserve to be there. You deserve to be out there. And when I'm on stories, sometimes I really have to figure out, in the middle of the woods, most of the time with strangers, is he being abrasive toward me because I'm a woman or because I'm a reporter? There's a big difference there. And I have to make sure I recognize what's going on there in that dynamic. Also, kids. Sometimes I'm on the road a lot and people will say, well, who has your kids? My husband has my kids. There's nothing wrong with sharing the load. I have women say, how do you, I speak at a university and the girls will say, well, how do you have kids and a career? How do I have it just like everybody else? It's not, I don't have to choose. You get to have both things.
Absolutely. And what strikes me about that is I've now been at this conference for a few days. I was at our National Wildlife Federation annual meeting for 4 days a few weeks ago. Nobody asked me, well, who's watching your boy? I have a new baby boy who's a few months old now. But while I'm away at these conferences, and it's tough being away from them, no matter who you are, if you're a parent, it's tough being away from your kids. But no one has asked me here, well, what are you doing here? Who's taking care of your kids? The fact that somebody asks you that just strikes me as so odd.
and all the time.
Yeah.
And women. You have to realize that maybe people don't, well, especially a lot of women don't realize that you can have both. Kids or a career, scratch that. It's kids and a career, if that's what you want. My boys are just as comfortable with a mom that works as they are with a dad who cooks dinner. And that's fine. That's exactly how we want our household to run. I think I'm a better mom because I work. And that's just because I feel like it, I don't think you have to give up what you want to do just because you also want to have kids.
What are you looking forward to after the launch of this book? Are there, and maybe it's too soon to look after that. Like you are launching this huge book, but what kind of adventures do you have lined up after that? What are you looking forward to doing this fall?
Well, I'm looking forward to holding the book in my hand. First off, I took all the news stories that I'd done over the years, and I pulled out the ones where there was really a lesson in there, and where things really hit a dynamic moment. like that grizzly bear in my face. And those moments have substance. So how do I turn that substance into words? And I've spent so many months taking that news story and trying to figure out where the I fits into that story and how to make it appeal to people in that way. And go from, I'm not kidding you, 15,000 words to 50,000 words. 50,000 words for someone that writes 2-minute news packages is torture. So I think it's really expanded how I write. It's expanded how people perceive my work. I think it's good to really see what people are seeing when they look at me, take a good hard look at me, and figure out what really matters. And so this fall, when the book comes out, there'll be some book tour events and signings. But you know what I want to do? I want to get in the river and fish with my boys.
Nice. What's your favorite thing to fish for?
My favorite thing to fish for is brown trout, and they're not native, but I like browns. But I will say I have this obsession with salmon, and I think I'm obsessed with salmon because they just can't get to my neck of the woods, and they should be able to. I have never caught a salmon in Idaho. I have caught a salmon in Iceland. I went, can you imagine? I went all the way around the world to catch a Chinook, and they spawn where I live, but I can't touch them. That to me is unbelievable. And so I won't get to fish for salmon still, but if I could, I would probably say they were my favorite.
And your production company is called Tightline Media. Are you primarily a fly angler, or do you kind of fish with every different type of tackle? That's
funny you would ask. Yeah. I am fly because you move more. You know me. I have a lot of energy, and I go fast, 1,000,000 miles an hour.
So you're not going to sit there with a bobber.
Yeah, that's not for me. And I even bought my boys spinning rods when they were smaller, and they'll sit in the basement. And my husband and I both fly fish, and we have a drift boat, and we have a high side drift boat because when our boys were really little, we didn't want them falling out. And they know how to cast, but not with spinning rods because we tried it, and I'm terrible at it. And so they can throw a good fly line now, and they like Tenkara rods, which don't have a reel. Those are great for kids because they don't make a mess of the line. But I like to throw flies, and I like to. I really get a kick out of just seeing if I can fool a fish. And sometimes I miss a lot of hits. And a lot of times they don't make it to the boat. So I'm not a big, how many fish did you get today kind of fisher.
Yeah.
But I can tell you how many times a fish looked at my fly, and I think that's brilliant if I can get him to do that.
It's amazing how our species gets so much enjoyment out of fooling a fish. But that's what it's about. And of course, just as I mentioned, I have a new boy, so learning from you, who has now taught your sons how to fish. How do you get him into it? When did you start fishing with them?
I fished pregnant.
Okay.
I went on wildfire pregnant. I mean, so my boys knew a lot before they were even touching their feet to the ground about our outdoor environment. The best thing about where you are right now with your son is he can't walk yet. So what you do is you stick him in a pack, and I'll tell you right now, it's going to be 10 times harder to go, and your percentage of fish you catch, if you go by quantity, it's going to go way down.
Oh, trust me, I barely caught anything to begin with. So
the important thing is when you have kids and you're convinced that you're still going to be that outdoor family, you have to make the effort to be that outdoor family. It's going to be hard. You're going to take 500 pairs of clothes. They're probably going to throw up on them. They're going to fall in the water. But in this little magical moment here where they can't walk, they're in a backpack on your back. And you've got to be careful when you cross rivers. But putting them out in that environment at a young age teaches them when they're older that this is just where we go, this is just part of our life. And then when they get a little bit older, you guarantee I'm banking on my boys knowing how to row my boat.
So you got ready-made drift guides.
Exactly.
That's great. Well, Kris, it's been awesome talking with you on the National Wildlife Federation Outdoors podcast. Where can people find both your work and your book?
All in one place, tightlinemedia.com.
Great. This has been the National Wildlife Federation Outdoors podcast. I'm your host, Drew Youngdyke, and as always, we are supported by Rep Your Water, whose Great Lakes gear, as well as the Stop Asian Carp collaboration, helps our work to keep Asian carp out of the Great Lakes.